All right, so a couple very important developments have taken place over the last few days, and one of these topics will be massively covered and reported on, while the other will be a little bit more hush-hush, and there is a reason for that. I've already noticed a lot of reporters and YouTubers are trying to avoid this topic despite it trending online all weekend long. And you might wonder why, and that's really simply because it is a conversation that can be viewed as sensitive. There's a fear online of talking about or having opinions on such topics, but we're not going to do that on this channel. I feel very strange completely avoiding topics simply because there are a group of people that doesn't like what they hear. And of course, I'm talking about Sweet Baby Inc. There's a good chance that you may have heard about them over the weekend, and you may even be confused as to what in the world is going on. Why is everybody seemingly so angry with this company? And, well, I'll try to give you the lowdown on all of that today, and then you can kind of come up with your own conclusion on whether or not you think people are overreacting to this news, or if you think they're just flat out bad for the game industry. My goal today is to simply inform you, and then you can come up with your own opinion by the end of this video, because I think that's how the world should work. I feel like we should all be able to have an adult conversation and come up with opinions without being crucified, and you should be able to come up with your own conclusion yourself. Now, we will also talk about the latest on the Nintendo versus Yuzu emulator situation. There was, in fact, a settlement, and this certainly has the community buzzing on whether or not this will be the beginning of a domino effect. So do make sure to stay tuned for all of that, but let's just go and get right into this Sweet Baby Inc. thing. And I mean, there's a lot to go over here, so just kind of bear with me. Now, if you don't know who Sweet Baby Inc. is, which a lot of people did not before this weekend, they're a narrative consultation company that claims to focus on inclusivity and diversity. Basically, game companies will hire them to comb over their writing and characters to make sure it's okay to set out in the wild. And at first, that doesn't really sound all that bad. Inclusion is perfectly fine. So why are people so angry about this company? Well, that's because on second glance, a lot of the games that they've been a part of, it's rather clear that they have negatively impacted those games with questionable writing that may belittle one group in order to prop up another. Or it's just flat out filled with their own ideologies that's often represented in a poorly written way that more or less feels forced upon players. Somehow, their writing and agendas ironically tends to cause more division than actual inclusion, even though that's what they're supposedly supposed to do. One specific thing that fans are really passionate about, though, is with them actively changing already developed and beloved characters to prop up their own worldviews. I'll give you an example of that here in just a moment. We're getting there. But first, let's take a look at some of the games that they've actually been involved with. And this is where the story really begins. So somebody on Steam decided to make a curator that basically lets fans know which games Sweet Baby Inc. has touched. That way consumers can ultimately make their own informed decisions on whether or not they want to support said games. An informed decision is never a bad thing. The more informed your customers are, that should be a good thing. So this really is not a big deal at all. You don't have to follow them if you don't want. But if you look at the curator, this list includes games such as Gotham Knights. It includes Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Forspoken, the Saints Row reboot, Starfield, God of War Ragnarok, the Spider-Man games, among several others. So they've been a part of some rather sizable, well-known AAA projects over the last few years, a lot of which has failed miserably, in large part because they were criticized for their writing very specifically. Or even with some of the better games on this list, they've also been a part of, different controversies due to the characters and writing decisions that were made in those games. And that's where this story really starts to take a turn. Now, you would think a consultation company that's been a part of some big, well-known projects would be proud of their work. You would think that they'd want their company to be front and center, loud and clear. We've been a part of all of these great projects, but that's not really what happened this weekend. Instead, what happened was that one of their employees found out about this curator and decided to vent on Twitter by telling their followers to report this curator and user, so not only the curator would be removed from Steam, but also said user would be banned from Steam, losing all access to their games. That is the very definition of targeted harassment and is against Twitter guidelines, which is something that the game community quickly picked up on. Now, as of the making of this Twitter comment, this is quite humorous. That Steam curator only had 9,000 followers. But have you ever heard of the term Streisand effect? Well, if you haven't, the Streisand effect is a theory that believes that if you attempt to hide, remove, or censor information, the consequence is that, ironically, you'll get even more attention, which is exactly how all this played out. As of the making of this video, that Sweet Baby Steam curator now sits at a whopping 134,000 followers and is still rapidly growing. It is now officially one of the biggest curators on all of Steam, which is honestly crazy to think about because most people weren't even aware that Sweet Baby existed until just mere days ago. Well, ironically, fans are definitely aware now, and they seem to be furious about the situation. Sweet Baby ultimately just shot themselves in the foot here by bringing awareness to themselves, and not in a good way. And, that's one of the things that people are most concerned about. Why is a consultation group even trying to hide their work in the first place? Are they not proud of their work? Why are they bothered by a curator that simply makes customers aware of what they're connected to? Again, you would think that they would be proud of their work, and if they were, they could simply ignore this curator. But instead, they're showing insecurity, with it bringing awareness to the games that they're tied to. It almost comes off as if they want to operate in the shadows, and that only makes fans even more suspicious than what they already are. So what exactly is going on here, and why are they trying to operate without gamers' eyes on them? And, I really do love the game community sometimes. There is no other community out there that is quite as passionate about the products that they support. And of course, when gamers are passionate about a topic, they will work together to solve the problem. And lo and behold, gamers did some digging around and they found all kinds of things about the employees at this company. They actually discovered that they have some direct connections with Gamersgate, as some of the employees have actually worked for both. Suspiciously, it seems like they've been live and well for some time now and have just kind of been acting in the background. It does seem like they're operating just under a different name now. It's also been discovered that some of these employees have done some rather shady things, such as DDoS a website to shut it down simply because they had differing worldviews than them. There's also been various comments uncovered that they've made in the past that might contradict their alleged claims of inclusion and diversity. This apparently includes belittling specific groups to prop up others that they feel is more worthy. From all indications, these are not professional people. They don't seem to like games all that much or the characters that fans have come to love. Instead, this group is being accused of only existing in order to spread their ideology and products to indoctrinate fans regardless of whether or not it lowers the quality or affects already established characters to fit their agenda. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and use an example. I think some fans really started to key in on who Sweet Baby was after the release of Spider-Man 2. This is a massively popular franchise after all, with some of the most beloved characters ever made. Of course, people are paying attention. And while the gameplay itself is very good, and I don't think the story is entirely bad, but there has been some controversy with some of the writing and how they handled specific characters. Specifically, I think the easy example here would be Mary Jane Watson, which really sticks out because she noticeably looks different than what she did in the first game. And she also goes against how the character has been viewed historically. It almost seems like they went out of their way to completely change her to fit a specific agenda. And this ultimately is the mantra of Sweet Baby. More so, and just for my own opinion, I never really did understand this allergic reaction that some people seem to have with attractive characters. I mean, I've been around women my entire life, and every single time I've ever seen them make a character, they always try to make them beautiful. For that matter, most of the time, whenever I see guys create characters, they try to make them look cool, or they'll just try to make them look goofy instead. But a lot of them do try to make them cool. I mean, the whole cosmetic things. Why do people buy cosmetics? Because they want their characters to look good. But, whatever. Back to MJ. There is a point in the game where she apparently is a one-person army, while Peter Parker and Miles Morales, two superheroes, are somehow struggling. The writing just didn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense, and it just kind of seemed to be there to fit a specific worldview, and that bothered a lot of fans. Now, this is just one such example, but it is coming from a popular IP, and these are topics that's been often discussed well before anybody even knew about Sweet Baby in the first place. So this further leans into why some fans are highly suspicious of the games that they touch. I mean, at the end of the day, all fans really want are good games with good writing that respects the already established characters that they've come to love. Inclusion and diversity is completely fine. Let's not get this wrong here. But you still have to keep the main thing the main thing. If you have to belittle one group to prop yourself up, there's probably a problem there. If you have to change an already existing character just to inject your own point of view, there's probably a problem there. It's not about you. And if you avoid logical storytelling to prop up one specific group, that's also probably a problem. While Mary Jane Watson is a great character, and actually she's very useful and strong in her own ways, she still, however, is not a superhero character, and that's never what she was meant to be. She can still be a great and important character in so many other ways that is very useful to Peter Parker and Spider-Man, that really shows her own strengths, but they did not go in that direction, and that's the complaint that a lot of people have. I think one of the biggest questions that a lot of gamers have right now is that if this company has mostly a bad track record, I mean, this company is behind a lot of flops, including Forspoken and Saints Row, both of which have led to those studios shutting down or being disbanded. So why does these big publishers like Xbox, like PlayStation, Square Enix, and so many others, why do they support them in the first place? I mean, even with the good games that they're tied to, they don't come without questionable decisions and writing that sometimes comes off as insulting. So I don't really think the publishers are without blame here. At the end of the day, these publishers are choosing to sign with Sweet Baby. And realistically, Sweet Baby is not the only consultation group like this. This is just the only one that gamers are currently aware of. But I think that's all the more reason why this topic is so important. I always feel like it's important for customers to be able to voice their own opinions because that's the only thing that these publishers and companies will actually pay attention to. The only thing that speaks to them is money. And then let's just hypothetically say these games are boycotted. Well, then these companies will be forced to pay attention. And that does kind of seem to be the direction that we're currently heading in. The only question, I guess, with that is just how widespread is that frustration from gamers. Not everybody necessarily believes that Sweet Baby is doing something wrong. I've seen some people believe that they're just kind of the boogeyman of the game industry and that people are simply overreacting to all this. Some people believe that they don't negatively impact stories and characters at all. And that's where I'm going to go ahead and let you all decide for yourself. Based on what you know and what you've seen from the games that they've been involved in, do you think Sweet Baby and other companies like them is good or bad for the game industry? Let me hear your thoughts and reasoning below. Just kind of be respectful to each other is all I ask. Okay, so admittedly, that was a pretty long topic. Hopefully everybody's nice and calm. But we do have one more thing to talk about that people are also very passionate about, being emulation. Of course, last week, news broke that Nintendo was suing the creators of the Switch emulator by the name of Yuzu. Now, at that time, I said the way Nintendo filed that particular case, I just didn't feel like it was as cut and dry as what some people were maybe making it out to be. Yes, emulation is not illegal on its own. I completely understand that. But there were some filings that made it seem like the Yuzu team was flying pretty close to the sun. They were making a lot of money on their Patreon account, which means that they're also making money off of Nintendo games as well. And that's something that Nintendo will pay attention to. The Yuzu team was making more than $30,000 a month off of their Patreon account. They also allegedly had guides that described how to decrypt Nintendo games even if they were illegally downloaded, and that one I think was rather significant. So I felt like because of those things, a judge might listen to some of Nintendo's arguments, and it seems like the Yuzu team might have felt similar because they've now decided to settle out of court and agreed to pay Nintendo $2.4 million in damages, and they also had to publicly say that Yuzu was quote-unquote primarily designed to circumvent and play Nintendo Switch games. In other words, it was meant to play pirated games. So that's a pretty rough outcome, and the concern now is that it could actually impact other emulators if Nintendo decides to target them as well, because they can now use this quote against other emulators as well. So this settlement likely put all emulation teams on high alert, and that right there is what I think Nintendo's ultimate goal was. They want these groups to think twice about what they're doing, especially with the Switch successor right around the corner. I said this last week, but I don't think that this case was simply about all emulation as a whole. I think the big problem that they had was that it's affecting their active hardware and software. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, as an example, was downloaded more than 1 million times before it even officially released, and Nintendo Nintendo wants to keep that from happening going forward, including with the Switch successor. They might not necessarily be able to fully stop Switch emulation, the code's already out there, but they will use this case to deter Switch to emulation if they can. I think that's what this case was about. I think that it was used as a deterrent. They'll at least make people think twice about emulating their active platforms going forward. At the bare minimum, they don't want people to be encouraged to make these emulators and get money in return. I guess my big thing with this situation, though, is that even though I support emulation because it is important to keep older games alive, I think the emulation community is doing wonders. But I do, however, think that there are more questions involved when you're talking about active hardware in games that just released. For me personally, and again, everybody will feel differently about this, but for me, I wouldn't emulate something like that. But this is definitely going to be a hot topic in the coming days. I think there's a real fear there will be a domino effect that comes afterwards, and hopefully that won't be the case. Again, I think emulation is incredibly important. But again, let me know what you all think about all of this. Do you think Nintendo was right or wrong, and what do you think about the emulation scene going forward? Do you fear a domino effect is incoming, or do you think Nintendo will stop here? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this video. Both these topics are actually very important topics that a lot of people are passionate about. So again, do let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. But till next time, peace out.